Perrenoud is an entrepreneur, author, teacher, and artist who has exhibited her work nationally. She teaches here and abroad and has been included in many books and magazines on beadwork. She is the teacher of 2 previous videos produced by Victorian Video Productions, Bead Weaving Peyote Stitch and Bead Crochet. She has spent her life mastering all forms of needlework, millinery, French hand sewing, fine garment making, and embroidery of all sorts.
Beaded herringbone stitch is most commonly found among South African beadwork. The South African seed bead weaving is the most innovative in the world. Sometimes you'll see herringbone stitch referred to in books as endebelly beadwork. The bead weaving pattern in this stitch is very common to what is created in yarn with knitting. This piece is a very old historic piece from South Africa, and this one is made for the tourist trade, a contemporary piece. And the piece behind me is a reproduction of a very old piece also. This is an incredibly versatile stitch. You can work it flat or in a tube and can increase and decrease in either situation. It is an unusual stitch in that you are not adding beads to fill in holes from previous rows. You'll need size 11 seed beads, size 8 seed beads. Some check press glass pendants would be fun. I use size D Nymo thread or Conso size E. Good sharp embroidery scissors are great for making a clean cut on your thread. I use a little awl for taking out my mistakes with the thread, and this is a very safe cutter. You can condition your thread with wax or other conditioners. I won't jump out of the screen and scold you. Do whatever you're comfortable with. You should, however, always seal your knots with nail polish or glue. Nylon thread is very slippery. It likes to unknot itself. Size 10, 11, or 12 beading needles, or size 10 or 11 milliner's needles. You'll find herringbone graph paper in lots of bead stores, or there are even software for your computer for them now. Or I just use square engineering paper, and each block is 1 bead. I like the ceramic watercolor trays because they're heavy and they don't tip over as easily. And my new toy is a CD case that I've lined with cardboard and foam, and 1 dish fits inside the CD case for travel. And your eyes will be very grateful if you use good lighting while you're working. Flat herringbone weave was introduced to the contemporary beadwork community in Virginia Blakelock's book, Those Bad Bad Beads. She observed an old piece of endebelly beadwork and looked at the beads and the thread path and came up with the first and second row. It was very complicated, but this is what they did. We're going to simplify that a little bit. We're going to do a single needle ladder stitch using seed beads to start ours. To begin, pick up 2 beads on your needle and thread and tie a square knot. You remember that. Right over left. The beads will sit side by side, left over right. Take your needle and go downward through that second bead. Now pick up another bead and again go downward through the second bead. We'll form a loop and the third bead will sit right next to the second bead. Now go upward through the third bead. You'll be working in a counterclockwise motion. Pick up another bead, and this time we're going to go up through the third bead, and if you think about it, we're now working in a clockwise motion. Go downward through the fourth bead. Snug it up. Now continue working until your piece is 6 beads wide. So now we're working in a counterclockwise, coming up through the 5th bead, pick up the 6th bead, go up through the 5th bead. We're working clockwise now, down through the 6th bead. Let's review the stitch one more time on a graph. We tied our square knot with our 6-inch tail. Then we took our needle and thread and went back through number 2 bead again. We picked up bead number 3, working in a counterclockwise motion. We went back through bead number 2, back through bead number 3 again. This time we're working clockwise. Pick up bead number 4, back through bead number 3, back through bead number 4 again, clockwise, and now we're going to work counterclockwise, picking up the next bead. It's really not that hard, and once you get the hang of it, it'll go great. Now let's start our first real row of herringbone stitch. Pick up 2 beads. This is bead number 1, bead number 2 now. Go down through bead number 2. Come up through bead number 3. Again, pick up 2 beads. The whole stitch is worked 2 beads at a time. Go down through bead number 4. And up through bead number 5. Pick up 2 more beads, down through bead number 6. Now we need to turn. There are 4 different methods for turning, and we're going to review each one. Method number 1. This is an African technique. At the end of the row, we're going to go underneath the thread. This one happens to be where the ladder stitch was. And back through the last 2 beads. Now we're ready to start our next row. Each different method is going to have advantages and disadvantages to it, but we can use these in different techniques. The advantage to this one is it's very strong. The disadvantage is it makes a stiff edge, and the beads on the edge are vertical instead of your traditional herringbone stitch that angle back and forth. So let's work down the row again. Pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 2 and up through bead number 3, all at the same time now. Pick up 2 beads. Now you're going to notice already in the stitch it's very unique in that we're adding beads on top of beads and stitching the holes together. Down through bead number 4, up through bead number 5. Sometimes the beads don't want to sit right. I take my thumbnail, give them a little flick, and now they're in their little traditional V pattern. Pick up 2 more beads, down through bead number 6. Let's try that turn again. Underneath the thread, back up vertically through the last 2 beads on the row. Now, method number 2, at this point, we would make a knot, a regular sewing knot, underneath the thread, back through the loop that the thread creates. This again is another old African technique, and if you're making beadwork that is going to be passed down for generations, A knot on the end of the row is useful in case it starts to fall apart, all the beads don't fall off. You've made your knot, back vertically up through the last 2 beads on the ends of the last 2 rows. Let's work one more row. Pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 2, up through bead number 3. I'm maintaining my tension by curling this thread over my index finger and hanging onto it with my second finger. Pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 4, up through bead number 5. And flick those beads into a little V. Pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 6. At the end of the row, I usually flip my work over, so I'm always working away from my body. This is just preference, whatever feels comfortable to you. So at the end of the row, I turned my work, do method number 2, turn again, underneath the thread, back through the loop to tie a little knot, and vertically back up through the last 2 beads on the ends of the rows. Let's review those turns on the chart. As you're working down the row, you picked up 2 beads, went into those 2 beads, picked up your last 2 beads in the row, you went into the bead on the end. Method number 1, you go underneath this thread and vertically back up through the last 2 beads. Method number 2, you came down through the bead, underneath the thread, tie a little knot, a little sewing knot, and vertically back up through the last 2 beads on the ends of the rows. So let's march down another row of beads here. Pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead, up through the third bead. Pull it up tight. Hold it with your second finger, your thread. Pick up 2 beads, down through the 4th bead, up through the 5th bead. Pick up 2 beads, down through the 6th bead. Turning method number 3. Our thread is coming out of the second bead down on the end of the edge of our beadwork. Right now you're going to go up through the bead that you just added. This bead will try and loosen up, so what I have to do is I actually put my thumb right on top of it and pull tight with the thread, and it will stay there. I can hear some of you gasping. Yes, the thread shows on the outside of that bead. This is another old African method that we've observed in pieces. The disadvantage is obviously the thread shows on the outside of your beadwork, but if your thread matches the beads, does it matter? Also, if you're going to apply an edging to this later or stitch it down, it really doesn't matter. The advantage is the piece is supple to the edge and the herringbone weave of the angled bead stays intact this way. So let's work another row of beadwork and try method number 3, turn again. Flip it over in my hand, pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 2, up through bead number 3. You're going to be saying this in your sleep pretty soon. Hold the thread tight, pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 4, up through bead number 5, flick those beads into place, pick up 2 beads, down through bead number 6, turning method 3. Go back through the bead on top on the edge that you just added. It will like to loosen up. Be careful, pull it tight, and sometimes I have to put my thumb right on top of that bead to hold it in place. So now let's review this on our graph. So here we are working down the row, picked up 2 beads, down through these 2 beads, picked up 2 more beads on the edge, down through this bead, around the outside of him, and back up through the last bead that you just picked up. So I'm just finishing my last row, and we're going to try turning method number 4. I've gone down through the bead on the end. I'm going to come over horizontally and go up through the 5th bead in the previous row. And then I'm going to angle over and come up through the bead on the edge from the row that I just made. This is a more contemporary turning method. Now let's weave another row and try that again. Down through 6, pull it all the way up through bead number 5 in the previous row, and angle over and go up through bead number 6 in the row that you just made. So now you have 4 different methods for turning. In Africa, they just use whichever one works the best for the piece, and that's what we should do. Let your task dictate the work. Sometimes we can get snooty as to which one is the correct way. They all work. So now let's look at our chart and review that last method number 4 of turning. So here you are weaving along, picked up 2 beads, down through the bead, over, pick up the 2 beads on the end, down through the bead on the end, angle over, up through the 5th bead in the row before, angle over, and up through the 6th bead on the row that you just made. As you're working back and forth, you'll notice your thread tends to twist. We automatically put a twist in our thread when we're working. To relax your thread so this twist doesn't cause a knot, we need to relax our thread. There's the twist that's forming. Pick your beadwork up and let your needle dangle, and then run your fingers along the thread to untwist it. And then you can continue working. Now we have a very short thread here left, and we need to tie this thread off and start a new thread. So let's do that. Our thread is coming out of bead number 3, so I'm just going to go down through bead number 4. Just go down a few beads. Do not tie around the vertical thread right here between the beads. Instead, tie the knot around the horizontal thread between bead number 3 and 4 here. Pull up, back through the loop, just like a regular sewing knot, and pull it up. There's your little knot, and at this point I would put a tiny bit of nail polish on the end of my needle and wipe it on that knot to seal it. Never trust one knot. Go down vertically, a few more beads in column number 4, around the horizontal thread between bead number 3 and 4, back through the loop, just like a sewing knot, pull it up, and then seal my knot with a little bit of nail polish or glue. You're tying around the horizontal thread because then the knot won't slip. If you're tying around the vertical thread, your knot can slip up and down in that column. Now, you always bury your tail. Go through a couple more beads in that column, and now you can cut off your tail. Never cut a thread right next to the knot. Now let's add our new thread. Usually I work with a 2 arms length of thread, like fingertip to fingertip. I come up through column number 3, go through a few beads, and I leave a little tail sticking out of the bottom here, and I hang on to that because now I'm going to tie a knot in the same place. Horizontal thread between the beads, back through the loop, seal my knot, go through a couple more beads, vertically up through column number 3, don't pull too tight, another knot around the horizontal thread, back through the loop. There's our nice little knot. Seal your knot, then vertically up till you are coming out of the last bead on top. And now you're all in place, ready to pick up 2 more beads and continue weaving. From your little sample piece you're making, you can see that it's starting to turn into a little rectangle. Well, if you continue working and start picking up different color beads, continue to practice the different turns or concentrate on ones you like, you can turn your little sample into a little rectangular bracelet like this. Just attach a clasp to the end and there you go. You've got a piece of jewelry to wear. Now here's another one, just a simple rectangle, but this is done in triangular beads. They give it a real reptilian look. This is going to be our project. You're going to have lots of practice turning in it. It's a braided ribbon bracelet. We're going to start at the base here and make a little rectangle. You know how to do this already. Then we're going to weave the borders. Then we're going to weave these strips. They are straight at first. And then weave them all back together again at the other border after we've braided them together. So let's get out the materials that you're going to need for this project. You need your size 12 beading needles, Nymo thread size D to match 3 colors of beads that you're going to use. 1 color for the border and then the 2 different colors for the strips in the middle, the ribbons that we weave together. And then you'll also need your nail polish for your knots and your scissors and things like that. There are detailed instructions for this project in your insert. You already know how to make a ladder. You know how to weave back and forth. So make a ladder 12 beads long. Weave for herringbone 4 more rows. So there'll be a total of 5 rows there. You're going to use turning method number 4. So I've done my 5 rows total here, including the ladder stitch, and now I'm going to make my borders. Pick up 2 beads, go down through the second bead, going to cut over and come up both beads on the edge right there. Pull your thread up, pick up 2 more beads. Go down through the bead, second over on the edge, cut over and come up both beads on the edge. This is pretty easy. This is not herringbone stitch. This is square stitch, but that's okay. It looks good with the herringbone. So continue doing this for 91 rows. When you're done with that, just leave that long thread hanging. We'll use it later. And you're going to come back, move all the way over to the other edge of your little piece here, add a new thread, get a long piece of thread, start on the edge here and do the same thing. Add 2 beads, come down, cut over, come up, add 2 beads. So you're going to make another little 2 bead border on this edge over here, 91 rows long. So this is what you have so far. You have your base 12 beads wide, 5 rows long, your borders 2 beads wide and 91 rows long, And I'm using really big beads so you can see better in the video. But this is your piece. The base and just the borders are what you have done so far. Now let's go back and make one of these ribbons here in the middle. Add a new thread coming in through the third column over in your piece. Come up, tie a knot, up some more, tie another knot, and then come out the top there. Pick up 2 beads of your first ribbon color, stitch down, and we're going to have to make 2 motions for this, and back up again. Pick up 2 more beads, down. So your piece is only 4 beads wide at this point. You're going to do turning method number 4. So that means you come over 1 bead back and up through him. Just 1 bead like that. Pull it up. And then your thread angles over to the edge bead over here. And you're going to come up out of there. There we go. Now you're going to do this for 96 rows. Now you'll notice that I didn't flip my piece when I turned because we have those borders hanging in the way, and you'll probably get tangled up with them. So you can notice you can work back and forth without flipping your piece if necessary. So continue and make this little ribbon 96 rows long, and then we'll start the next one. So now your piece should look like this. You're going to start a new thread on the third column over, adjacent to the other border. And you'll begin weaving, picking up 2 beads of the other ribbon color. Down, up. Pick up 2 more. And again, you'll be weaving 4 beads wide. You're going to be doing the number 4 turn. And you're going to again make it 96 rows long. So finish that off now, and then we'll look at the next section. So now your piece should look like this. Your ribbons are both woven, 96 rows, borders 91 rows. Start yet another thread, and this one's going to come up along the edge of the border. This is going to be our weaving thread to hold the ribbons that are twisted over each other in place. What I'm going to do with that weaving thread is I'm going to come up to the top here where the base ends, and from that point there I count 15 beads up, and that's where I have my thread coming out right now. Then I've used some needles to mark on the other ribbons and border ahead of time where I need to be weaving. From here, where the colors change, count up 16 beads. Same with the second ribbon, count up 16 beads. And then on the other border, because the color's the same, it's hard to tell, but lay your needle across there, and from this point on, count up 15 beads. So we have those all marked. Now we're going to take ribbon A and lay it over top of ribbon B, so it's crossed like that. And now we're going to weave these together for 5 rows, following the thread paths that are already there. So we're going to weave down through the adjacent bead where our thread is coming out. Going to go up through the first ribbon that's crossed over. Let's remove our marker needle for right now. We don't need that there. Pull that up tight. And now you're just going to go down through the next bead, up through the next bead, following the thread path that's already there, down, Pull your next ribbon into place. There's the bead we want to go into with our marker in it. Let's remove that second needle, that's our marker. Now you're going to weave down, up, down, and then here's our other border. You're going to be coming up through him. Let's take this needle out, but I'm going to use my thumbnail to hold my place. Go up through that one and down again. Now let's do our number 4 method of turn. Come over to the adjacent bead. This is so our thread doesn't show on the outside. Tried to get a little knot there, just pull it backwards with your needle. Then we angle up to the side bead. And now we're ready to weave again. Back and forth. This is our second row of holding this all together. And you're just going to be weaving above the beads in the beads that you just wove together. So continue weaving back and forth this way for 5 rows. You'll end up on the opposite border this time. Take your weaving thread, go up the border 15 more beads. Take your extra little needles again, count up 16 beads on your 2 ribbons, mark them with your little needles, count up 15 beads on the opposite border again, take ribbon number B, cross it over ribbon number A this time, and then weave back and forth for 5 more rows. So you're securing your twists into place. You're going to do that 5 times total in the bracelet. So now you've been alternating crossing over your ribbons, weaving them together for 5 rows. Here's our first one, second one, third one, fourth one, and then here's the 5th one. We've got them all woven together at the end here, so that now we're ready to weave the little end tab here in the border color. So we'll pick up 2 beads in the border color, and now we're just going to stitch across the whole piece here. You're going to do this for 5 rows. After you've woven your 5th row, you need to go back through that 5th row and reweave it. Because you notice as you've been weaving, the tops of your little columns are not sewn together. They kind of like to splay out a little bit. And here we are at the end of our row. Let's pretend this is the 5th row. And I'll show you weaving back through it. Do your method 4 turn, over 1 bead, angle up to the edge. See how these beads are all splayed apart here? You need to weave those together. So you're just going to go down and up, down and up, down and up, all the way across without adding beads. So now your piece is completely woven. And what you can do is attach a commercial finding here. If you want, just as an option, come down into the beads on your border and your 2 tabs. And you can use size 14 beads. And you're basically just going to be stitching underneath the thread between the pairs of beads. And a little bead will sit there. Pick up a bead, stitch underneath the thread, and it's like a little surface decoration. You're never going through beads, you're just stitching under that thread. If your thread doesn't match your beads real well, these little surface beads will help hide that. And it just makes your work a little bit more three-dimensional. And I would do that down the borders and then on the tabs. When you're all done, all your extra tails that are hanging out, bring them down into the columns, tie a knot, go through some more beads, tie another knot, seal your knot, bury the tail. Then your bracelet is done. Now this bracelet for this particular pattern, little over 15 centimeters or 6 inches long. If you need to adjust it, remember you're going to need to adjust it in increments of 15 beads on your border and 16 beads on your 2 ribbon tabs, but you only have those kind of increments to work with. So there's your first project. So I've showed you how to do flat herringbone. You know how to turn. So now we're going to learn how to increase off the edge. So I want to increase off the edge here in my next row. So pick up 2 beads like normally you would start a row. And I'm going to turn by going underneath the thread of the row underneath of it. Go back up through the 2 beads on the edge. And now I want to increase here. Remember that ladder stitch? That's what we're going to do. Pick up 1 bead. The thread is coming out of the top of the bead, so we take our needle and go into the bottom of the bead. We're working in a clockwise motion, down from top to bottom through the new bead. Let's do 1 more bead increase. This time I'm going to go top to bottom, counterclockwise, bottom to top in the new bead. And sometimes I zigzag. Oh, that's okay. It looks more like herringbone stitch. Now I want to get back over here so I can continue to weave the herringbone stitch row. So just go up and down through the beads, and you're retracing your thread path. I'm going to go down through 2 here because that's what you normally would have done when you were adding beads. Come up through the bead here, and now you're ready to add new beads. Let's go to the other side. Now I'm going to go underneath the thread here, right there, up through the 2 beads on the edge here, and we're going to do a little ladder stitch 2 beads wide on this side. And then we will have increased evenly outward 2 beads on the same row. So now let's pick up 1 more bead, go down through the previous bead, and sometimes I just put my thumb on top of everything to hold it in place while I'm working, but of course you can't see anything that way. Working in a clockwise motion, come up, and now we're in position to start working herringbone stitch across this whole width. We started with 6 beads, now we have 10 beads across. This is a simple little increase, and now we have a project based on just this. And here's a really fun little ring I've designed for you using this simple increase off the edging. So what you're going to need for this are size 11 beads, your Nymo D thread, and some little check pressed glass pendants. If you can't find those, some tiny little drops will do. I'll be making this in size 8 seed beads, so they're a little bit larger than yours, and my pendants are a lot larger, but that's so you can see them. What I want you to start with is make a seed bead ladder 4 beads long, and then you're going to be working 14 rows of flat herringbone on top of that, 4 beads wide. You'll be using turning method number 1, so the stiffness of that turn will help with the ring. Then on row 16, we're going to increase now. We're going to do just like the increase I just showed you. Going to pick up 2 beads. I'm going to go underneath the thread, back through the 2 beads on the edge, and now we're going to do our little ladder stitch off the edge here. Pick up 1 bead, clockwise motion, top to bottom through the new bead, pick up another bead, top to bottom through the old bead. Let's tighten that up a little bit, and then bottom to top through the new bead, working in a counterclockwise motion this time. Tighten that all up, and often when I'm tightening, I grasp the thread and push on the bead with my thumbnail. Now we need to retrace our thread path and get back over to where we can continue working this herringbone row. So I'm just going to weave up and down, up. I'm going to go down through 2 beads, because that's what I would normally do if I was adding those 2 beads right now. Come up through these bead right here, pick up 2 beads, down, go underneath the thread, and then back up through the 2 beads on the edge here. And now I'm going to do a little ladder stitch off the side here, so that my piece goes from being 4 beads wide to 8 beads wide. Pull on that thread, I grasp the thread in my hand and push with my thumbnail to tighten up the stitch. So now we need to weave across this entire row. It will be 8 beads long with just our seed beads. You know how to do that, so just go ahead and do it. And there's our last 2 beads on this row. Under the thread at the base here, back up through the 2 beads on the edge. Now comes the fun part. We get to start picking up pendants. So pick up one of your pendants or drops and a seed bead. Down through the next, up through the next bead. Obviously it will be much easier to work with the pendants facing away. I often have to position this pendant so the hole is sitting vertically. So for this entire row, you are going to be picking up pendant bead, seed bead for each stitch all the way across. Down through the last bead, position that pendant so the thread is not twisted and the pendant hole is sitting vertically. Under the thread, you're doing turn number 1. Back through the 2 beads on the edge. Now for your next row, you're going to be picking up pendant seed bead across again. So you'll notice that where the pendants are sitting, pendant is always sitting on top of a seed bead. So they're like checkerboard on here. So you've completed this row. This is really important. From now on, when you're working in this dagger seed area, which is the focal point of your ring, you're going to use turning method number 3, the one with the thread on the outside. So we've just put these 2 beads on. Here's our thread. We're going to go around that dagger and up through the seed bead on the edge. The reason for that is it keeps our dagger standing upright on your ring instead of flopping over to the side. So now continue picking up dagger seed for each stitch. Work 9 rows total of your dagger seed stitches. Then you work 2 rows with just seed beads. So our thread is over here on the side, and we need to decrease 2 beads so we can do a row 4 beads wide again, and it's centered. Our thread is coming out of the top of the bead on the end. We go into the next bead over, top to bottom, come up through the 3rd bead over, bottom to top. We're in position. Now, was that the easiest decrease you've ever done in your life? Pick up 2 beads, and you're going to weave plain herringbone 4 beads across. So now you're going to return to turning method 1, which is underneath the thread, and back through the 2 beads on the end, because we don't need our thread to show on the outside of the band. It was only being used structurally to hold up those pendants before. So now make 10 more rows 4 beads wide. That will be 38 rows total for your ring, and that will equal a size 8 ring. If you want a ring that's larger or smaller, you need to make fewer or more rows depending on what you want. So here's your ring all woven. Now we just need to close up the back. So with your thread, just weave from column to column. Pull it up tight, and then go into the 2nd column on the other side. Weave deeply. You don't want your rows all pulling apart. And since we went in 3 beads on the first time, let's go in 4 beads this time. You want to stagger also how far in you go, so that if it tries to pull apart, it just won't be rows separating. This is a lot stronger by staggering it. Now I've just gone back and forth once. I would probably repeat this whole process again. And then tie a knot, go through some more beads, tie another knot, seal your knots, and then tie off your original tail where you started here. Here's our little ring. If you didn't have pendants, you could use your tiny little drops here. And remember, you know how to do this area right here, the square where you're alternating pendants and seed beads. If you want, just make that really long with lots of rows, and you have this bracelet. So now I'd like to show you some more methods of increasing on herringbone stitch. We're going to be working flat now because it's easier for you to see, but these methods work both on flat and tubular. Look at your herringbone work. The little beads that form the V are your actual stitch. The little beads that form like a little peak are the holes that are being stitched together. You need to be able to recognize this before we start distorting everything and increasing. Herringbone does lend itself to increasing better because you noticed how the top edges here are not stitched together, and it's easier to insert a bead in there. So let's pick up 2 beads, start working across. And at this point here, I'm going to start an increase between the pairs of beads. I'm going to pick up one bead. We're going to use a different color so you can really see it. There's one bead stuck in between there. And now continue to do herringbone across the row. And we will have to do the second half of the increase on the next row. Always takes at least 2 rows to complete an increase. Edge of the row. I'm going to flip my piece. Let's work normal until we get back to our 1 bead increase. We're just going to go down through the first bead here. Normally we would have gone down and up all at the same time. And here we are. Now we're going to pick up 2 beads, and now we're going to stitch into the first of the next pair of beads. So you have 2 beads sitting on top there. When you turn and come to the next row, you would separate these 2 beads, and it will start to form another column of pairs of beads here, and you would work off of that. Now this is the increase in perfect theory. Depending on your tension, the regularity of the size of your beads, we may have to alter this a little bit by stitching a little more. So let me show you what I do as a little trick here. This stitch often works with the 2 beads just stitched on top, but let me show you something else. You've added your 2 beads here. You stitch down through this bead, pick up 1 bead, stitch into your 1 bead increase, pick up the second bead, stitch into the first bead of the next pair. They're separated a little bit, and if you've done a little bit of beadwork, you've noticed this is peyote stitch now. I kind of snuck that in there. So this is if you're having trouble with the 2 beads buckling forwards and backwards out of the plane of your flat herringbone stitch. Let's turn. I'm going to flip the piece. I'm going to go down and now I'm going to add the 2 beads just like a normal herringbone stitch into the second one and up through the first bead of the next pair, and you'll see that it's going to start another column of V's here. Okay, let's review the increase between the pairs of beads on our graph here. Your thread would come up out of a bead. You'd pick up this bead and this bead, go down, and then you're going to pick up 1 bead, that was our yellow bead, between the pairs. Go all the way down, come up through a bead, pick up these 2 beads, go down, and then you're just finishing your rows. Now, remember, it takes 2 rows to complete an increase. So on the row coming back, pick up 2 beads, down, pick up 2 beads, down, come up, and you're picking up the 2 yellow beads, come down, and they're sitting on top, come up, and then you're finishing your row. If you're having trouble with those 2 beads buckling or not sitting properly, that's when we do our single beads at a time on top, and it's like peyote stitch. So you would come up, add 2 beads, down, add 2 beads, come down, pick up 1 bead, 1 yellow bead, stitch into your single bead that's between the pairs, come back up, pick up the second increase bead, go down, go into the first bead of the next pair of beads, pick up these 2 beads, and you're ending your row. The next increase is like an arithmetic increase between pairs of beads. It started the same way with 1 bead between the pair. Then the second row, it's 2 beads between the pair. Third row, 3 beads between the pair, and continues on like that, increasing 1 bead per row. So let's do that in beads now. Pick up 2 beads. Let's do our increase right here. I'll do them in yellow beads so you can see. Pick up 1 bead between the pairs. Now we need to work all the way across the row and turn I'm going to flip over my piece and work normal herringbone until you get to that increase area again with a different color bead. There we are on top of it, and this time we're going to pick up 2 beads. This is reminiscent of our last increase. Work to the end of the row and turn. And now this row we're going to pick up 3 beads. These beads just hang between the stitches in their row. They're not connected to each other. And this time we're going to pick up 4 beads and go up through the first of the next pair of beads. So these beads hang independently from each other. Rows aren't connected. If you were to work this in a circular pattern with these swags of arithmetic increases between your pairs and did those every other stitch, your piece would almost look like a morning glory flower. In another method of increasing, we're going to increase within a pair of beads and turn that one little V into 2 V's. So let's stitch first up to that point, and I'll show you. Again, I'll add yellow beads. So normally you would put 2 beads here. We're going to put 3 beads there. And they'll sit like a little picot stitch almost. Stitch into your next do normal herringbone stitch, turn, and I'm going to flip my piece over. Again, we have to do normal herringbone because it usually takes at least 2 rows to complete the stitch. Now I'm going to stitch down into the second of the first pair, and I'm going to stitch up through just the first of that 3 bead stitch that we did. I'm going to now pick up 2 beads and stitch into the second of that 3 bead stitch. Now I'm going to pick up 2 more beads and stitch into the third of that 3 bead stitch, and at the same time stitch into the first of the next pair. Now that's the complete increase, but I'm going to do 1 more row just to make it a little bit longer so you can see it better. Need to turn. I'm going to flip my piece, but it's symmetrical. Down, up into that first, those beads. And then here's our new bead pair that's formed a little V. I'm going to pick up 2 beads, stitch down, up, pick up 2 beads, down, up, and you can see here how before there was just 1 V. Now we've branched off and we have 2 V's. So let me go over this with you on the graph. So here's our 3 beads that we added on top of our pair, our increase. We added 3 beads, and then on the next row I flipped the piece. We did normal herringbone. We went into the first of the 3 bead stitch, added 2 beads, went into the second of the beads of the 3 bead stitch, added 2 beads, and then went into the third bead of that 3 bead stitch, and then continued with normal herringbone. Now I've designed a project that includes all kinds of increasing, and you will be an expert by the end of it. So let's look at that project. This next project is a fan bracelet I've designed for you. It uses this fan element right here many times. What you need to do first is to make a strip of herringbone 4 beads wide and many rows long as you need to encircle your wrist and then plus whatever clasp you use. For the materials, you're going to need 4 colors of size 11 seed beads, your Nymo thread size D in a color that'll blend with your beads, and your size 12 beading needle. If you work real tight, you might want to use a size 11 milliner's needle instead, because you'll probably break your beading needle. This is our little bracelet with many fan elements worked off of the base here. So let me work one of those fan elements with you off the base row. Check your insert for the instructions. Out of the 4 colors of beads I have, I start with the dark color and then slowly move toward lighter colors in my fan. I'm going to work a normal row of herringbone stitch off my base. So I'm coming up out of the bead on the far right side here. Go down through the next bead. I have 2 beads on my thread. Go up through the third bead. Pick up 2. Down through the fourth. For my turn, I'm going to go underneath the thread, turn number 1, and then back through the 2 beads on the edge. So now we have a row of herringbone perpendicular to our base. So on this next row here, I'm going to increase within the pairs. That means picking up 3 beads per stitch. I'm going to continue to work with my dark purple for now. 3 beads, down, up through the next bead, 3 beads, and down. Going to go underneath the thread, turn number 1, back through the 2 beads on the edge, and now I'm going to finish the second row of this type of increase where I'm coming out of the first bead, pick up 2 beads, Go into the second bead, pick up 2 beads, into the third bead, up through the first bead of the next 3 bead stitch there, pick up 2 beads, into the second bead, 2 beads, and into the third bead. And let's do our turn underneath the thread, turn number 1. Back through the 2 beads on the edge. Now the next row, I'm going to change colors. I'm going to go to my rose color now. Pick up 2 beads, normal herringbone, and now I'm going to start an increase between the pairs. Pink bead, pick up 1 bead, go into the next bead, pick up 2 beads, normal herringbone, go into the next bead, up through the next bead, pick up 2 beads for your next normal herringbone stitch, go down through 1 bead. Now we're going to do an increase between the pairs here, so just pick up 1 bead to start. Some of you are saying, wait a minute, this is starting to look like a mirror image. It is, so once you've made it halfway across, you're home free. And now you're going to stitch into the next bead and do your normal herringbone stitch. Turn number 1 under the thread, back through the 2 beads on the edge, and I'm just going to go through 1 at a time. There we go, ready to start the next row. Let's do another row of rose color. Pick up 2 beads, going to do a normal stitch on top here, and then now we're on top of our 1 bead increase, so to finish the increase now we're going to pick up 2 beads and stitch all the way over here to the next normal herringbone. Let's look at those 2 beads, how they're going to act. Well, they're going to separate already, so I'm going to go back. Remember that little trick I showed you with adding 1 bead at a time and kind of doing peyote stitch? We're going to do that here. I have 1 bead on my thread. I'm going to stitch into this 1 bead that was between our pairs, and then pick up the second bead now. There we go. We're going to treat those as a pair on the next row. Now we're back to another normal stitch. Pick up 2 beads, down, up, flick those 2 into shape. There we go. 2 beads, normal stitch, down, because now we're at the next 1 bead where we started our increase, and I'm going to do the same thing, mirror image. Pick up 1 bead, go into our 1 bead where we started our increase between the pairs, pick up second bead, and go into the last pair, just the first bead there. And now we're going to do a normal stitch, pick up 2 beads. We're at the end of the row and we're going to turn. Go underneath the thread, back through the last 2 rose color beads. Now the next row, pick up 2 beads, stitch into the next pair. And we're going to start another increase between the pairs, so pick up one bead, stitch into the next bead. Remember, these two beads are a pair. We're going to treat them as a normal little pair of V's, so pick up two beads, stitch into the next one, and we can actually stitch into the next one too, because we're going to do another normal herringbone stitch, down, up, all in one fell swoop. Pick up two beads. That's a normal herringbone. Go into the next stitch. This is where we did our little peyote thing, but we're going to treat that as a little V. Pick up two green beads, next stitch. Now, mirror image, we're going to pick up one bead because we're going to start an increase between a pair. Go into the first bead of the last pair, two green beads, down, and we need to turn, so go turn number one under the thread and back through the two beads on the edge here. Now, as you see, I've been changing the colors of beads pretty linearly, I would say. You know, it's like 2 rows purple, 2 rows pink, and now I'm going to do a second row of green. On most of the fans I did in here, there are probably no two fans alike that have their color changes in the same place. I think this will make your bracelet a lot more interesting. There's our one bead increase. Just to make it lie flat, we're going to pick up one bead, go into that one bead increase, pick up another bead, go into the first bead of the next pair. Now we finished off our increase. Now we're on a normal herringbone stitch. Pick up two beads, up through the next one. In here, I'm going to start a one bead increase. Let's put in the next color, light lavender. So this is beginning of an increase between pairs. There's our one bead stuck in there. Now I'm going to go back to green beads, normal herringbone, down, up, two beads, normal herringbone, down, and then here's our one bead. So pick up one bead, stitch into the single bead that was the beginning of an increase between the pairs, pick up a second bead, go into the first bead of the next pair, and now we're going to do normal herringbone where you pick up two beads, down, we need to turn, back through the last two beads. Now, I think we're on our last row, so I'm going to use all the lightest color, lavender colors now. Pick up two beads, go into the next, it's like that little peyote part, so you go into the first bead, add two beads, go into the second half of it, straighten out that next pair. Now the normal stitch, two beads, go down, go up, normal stitch, down, and now we're center over top of the 1 bead increase. I'm not going to stitch down and around. I'm just going to add the 2 beads strung together on top. Come up. We have almost home free. We have all normal stitches all the way across here. Down, up, down, up. See how I put my thumbnail in between them and kind of flick them to make them turn into that V pattern. Down and up. 2 more beads and you're home free. Last 2 beads, I'm going to take my needle and go along the edge of the fan through as many beads as I can. Push. And I'm going to take my thread and go back down through the last 2 beads on the edge of the fan. So we've gone all the way through the beads on the edge of the fan. Our thread is now back down to the base, just above the base. I'm going to go through 2 beads. Let's turn this on the side so you can see. I'm going to go through 2 beads on the edge of the base there. Pull it through. Push that fan back out of the way and start another fan. Just keep on going. So each fan is separated by 1 bead on the base, and the fans are built every other bead like that off the base. Try your color changes in different places. Ad lib a little bit. They're not going to see it, and it'll make your bracelet a lot more interesting. Earlier I showed you a simple decrease on the edge of your work. It was in the ring project, remember? Very easy. Now I'm going to show you a decrease where we terminate a pair of beads. These green beads here are going to disappear. This decrease takes 3 rows to accomplish. Let's pretend we're working our normal herringbone across, down, up. This is the area right now where we want to decrease. And instead of adding anything, I'm just going to stitch down, up, and I did not pick up any beads. Do normal herringbone in the blue area on the edge, down. I'm going to go under the thread, back through the 2 beads on the edge. I'm going to turn my work. Here we go again, normal herringbone. And now I'm going to come up through that first bead in the pair that I stitched together. Now I add 1 bead. Go down through the second bead in the pair I stitched together, up to the next pair, normal herringbone. Don't go down here, that's normally where you would go. You're going to go all the way over here to that single bead that's sticking up there. Pull tight, pick up 2 beads, and you're going to stitch all the way over here into the second bead of the next pair. Turn, go underneath the thread, back through the last bead. Beads aren't sitting quite right because they're very square beads. We're going to stitch 2 beads there. Go into the first bead of the next pair, pick up 2 beads, stitch down, and so now these green beads have disappeared, and we're going to have a V worked off of here and a V worked off of here. As you continue to work, this gap here will close up. Our next decrease is going to merge 2 pairs of beads. These green beads here, this column is going to disappear, and these 2 blue columns are going to come together. I've already stitched part of my row over here with the green ones. Again, it's going to take more than 1 row to complete this decrease, and you actually have to think about this ahead of time. picked up 2 blue beads. Normally I would stitch down into this blue bead, but I'm going to come all the way over here into the first of the green beads where I want to decrease. Come up counterclockwise through this blue bead, the second of the previous row in the pair, and then back through the second blue bead that you just picked up. Now pick up 1 green bead, and you're going to stitch all the way over here into the first of the next blue bead pair. Set that green bead on top, pull it tight, pick up 2 blue beads, stitch normally like herringbone. I'm going to turn, and I'm going to flip my work. Now, pick up 2 blue beads. Again, think in advance. I'm not going to go here. That's too normal. We're decreasing. I'm going to go all the way over here into that single green bead. Pull it up. Pick up 2 blue beads. With those 2 blue beads on your thread, you're going to stitch now into the second bead in the next blue bead pair. Let's go up through this green bead, do 1 more turn and 1 more row. The decrease itself is actually done, but I want to do 1 more row so you can see what's happened. So this vertical column of green beads has terminated here. We have a pair of blue beads here, a pair of blue beads here, and in the width here, where once there were 6 beads wide, now there's going to be 4 beads wide here. I warned you that increasing is a little easier than decreasing in herringbone, but practice these a few more times. You will find them useful if you're doing sculptural work and want your pieces to undulate back and forth. I'd like to show you some different techniques now for doing tubular herringbone. Start with another ladder. Always use an even number of beads though. Remember, herringbone is done in pairs. This one is 8 beads around. We're going to join that last bead to the first bead by just stitching through both of them, down and around a counterclockwise motion. I'm going to stack like colored beads on top of each other. So I'm picking up a blue and a lavender. Picked up 2 beads, down through bead number 2, up through bead number 3. This is going to look very reminiscent to you. Down through 4, up through 5, 2 beads, down through 6, up through 7, 2 beads, down through 8. Now, our thread is on the bottom here right now. Whenever you join rows, you're going to go through 2 beads at the end of every row. If you do that, your tube will look like this, and you will have straight lines if you're alternating colors like this. Now, using that same thread path for basic herringbone in a tube, you can also make little increases like this. Without doing an increase stitch, you just pick up progressively larger beads. I started with 11s, then I went to 8s, then I went to 6s. You can use size 8 hex cuts in there, and then you go back down your sizes back to 11s. And it looks like you've almost created a beaded bead on a beaded rope. Here's another example. Right here, what I've done is I have increased between my stitches, and I've done peyote stitch instead. You saw that when we did our arithmetic increase. And on this one here, I've gone from a size 14 to an 11 to a size 8 hex cut to a size 6 bead, and then back down the scale again. So what I've done is I've increased the size of the beads as I'm working in the stitch, and I've also increased between the stitches. You can use the same size bead or larger beads. Here I've caused the bead pattern in my tube to twist by slightly altering my herringbone stitch. Start a normal tube. On the second row, go down through one bead, up through two beads. On all the subsequent rows, you're going to go down through one bead, up through three beads from then on. Down through one bead, and up through three beads. And if you alternate colors, of course your twist will show up even better. Down through one, up through three, and pull tight on this. That's all there is to it. Leslie Frazier has experimented with twisting tubes a lot, and this is one I got from her. It is really great. It's called a twisting ribbon. To start, you use size 11 beads and cylinder beads, which are delicas or delicious or antiques, whatever you want to call them, the little Japanese cylinder beads. So you're using two sides beads. Now in the video here I'm using slightly larger beads which also work. I'm using 8s and 11s. So for your first ladder row you're going to stitch together in consecutive order your large bead, 3 of your small beads in color A, another large bead, and 3 beads of your smaller bead in color B. Connect your ladder row into a circle just like you'd be doing normal circular herringbone. Weave one row normally, always stacking like size beads on top of each other. For the next row, I'm picking up a large bead and a small bead in color A. From now on, I'm always going to go down through 2 beads and up through 2 beads. From now on, always down through 2 and up through 2. Pick up 2 small beads in color A, down through 2, up through 2. Pull tight. Now I'm going to pick up my large bead and 1 bead in color bead, down through 2, up through 2, pull tight. I wrapped the thread around my little finger and pushed on the beadwork to pull that thread tight. Pick up 2 small beads in color B, down through 2, and up through 2. And you've gone all the way around the row now. Do several rows like this and pull tight. Don't be worried, your twist isn't going to show up for a few rows. But after 10, 12 rows, it'll start to show up. Give it a little twist, and the twist will stay there, just like that. Isn't this great? I'd like to show you another twisting tube I call Cellini spiral herringbone. For your first row of ladders, you need to pick up 2 beads that are really big, 2 beads in your next size. I went and used 6s, then a pair of 8s, then a pair of 11s, then a pair of 14s, and then you get larger again. Pair of 11s, pair of 8s, and you tie those together in a circle and just start weaving your first row, stacking like sizes on top of each other. If you use different colors, it'll help you also. For your third row now, you're going to weave down through 1, up through 2. Your next row, you're going to weave down through 1, up through 3 beads. You might want to wax your thread on this one. Just run your wax along your thread once, especially if you're using matte beads. So now that I've shown you all these really great tubular techniques, you can combine them and make your own necklace, or use all of the same technique and make a bracelet. Here I've just increased the size of the beads to make a little bauble, a twisting technique, and here increase the size of the beads and increase stitches between them to make a focal point. My favorite part of the necklace is this great magnetic clasp that I've increased over to hide it. Now I'm going to show you how to make these wonderful little sea urchin baskets. For these you'll need either size 11 beads and small check pressed glass dagger pendants, Nymo D thread, which you may want to wax, and I used a size 11 milliner or straw needle. If you want to make the larger basket, it's size 8 seed beads, the medium-sized dagger-shaped pendant, Conso thread size E, which is an upholstery thread, and size 10 milliner or straw needles. Again, waxed my thread. Near the ending of the urchin basket, you might want to invest in some of these little curved size 10 needles. You'll find it very useful. This project will pull together learning your tubular techniques and increasing and decreasing and make it all worthwhile. So start with a ring of 7 beads. You're saying, wait a minute, this isn't a multiple of 4, this isn't an even number at all. Well, we're going to stitch a bead in between every bead here. So I picked up a bead, and this circle was tied slightly loosely so these new beads that are being stitched between our ring of beads slide in there a little better. So I'm picking up a bead and stitching into every bead around the ring. At the end of the row, go through that first bead that we added on this row, on the row that we just completed. Now you're ready for the next row. For row 3, you're going to pick up 2 beads per stitch and stitch into each bead from the previous row. They should be sticking up a tiny bit. Now we are going to be making pairs of beads to work off of. To end row 3, we're going to stitch into that 1 bead from the previous row, and then we're going to stitch into 1 bead from the first bead of this row, row 3. Now row 4, we're going to stitch 2 beads on top of each pair from the previous row. This is going to be our first real row of herringbone stitch. Down, up, get those 2 beads to sit in a V. Don't work real tight at this point. We want a flat circle. This is the bottom of our basket. Picked up 2 beads, down through 1 pair and up through the first bead of the next pair. So you're going to continue to pick up 2 beads and stitch them on top of the previous pair all the way around this row. So here we are at the last stitch of row 4. Pick up 2 beads, down, and then we're going to go through 2 beads because it's the end of our row, and this is just like what you did when you were doing your tubular herringbone stitch. Row 5. You're going to pick up 2 beads and stitch them on top of each pair, just like herringbone. And then you're going to stitch 2 beads in between each herringbone stitch. Go up through the first bead in that pair, pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead in the pair, pick up 2 beads. Do that all the way around. So here's my last stitch of row 5. It's the 2 beads between stitches, and I'm going to go through 2 beads to end the row. Row 6, 2 beads on top of every pair. And you're going to do this for 2 rows, row 6 and 7. And at the end of every row, you're going to go through 2 beads. Starting row 8, you're going to stitch a pair of beads on top of each pair, doing your normal herringbone, and then 1 bead between each pair. Repeat that all the way around, alternating between those 2, and then repeat this for row 9 also. So I picked up 2 beads, pick up 1 bead, stitch up through the first bead of the next pair, pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead of that pair, pick up 1 bead, and up through the first bead of the next pair. Pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead in the pair, pick up 1 bead, and up through the first bead of the next pair, all the way around. Row 10, you're going to pick up 2 beads and stitch them on top of each previous pair, and then 2 beads strung in between each pair. We're starting to increase a little bit more because our concentric circles are getting bigger. 2 beads, down through the second bead in the pair, pick up 2 beads, up through the first bead in the next pair, 2 beads, down through the second bead in that pair, 2 beads, and up through the first bead in the next pair. Do that all the way around. At the end of the row, go through 2 beads. For row 11, you're going to stitch 2 beads on top of each pair from the previous row. Again, at the end of the row, you're going to go through 2 beads. Down through the second bead in the pair, up through the first bead in the next pair. Pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead in the pair, up through the first bead in the next pair. Pick up 2 beads, down through the second bead in the pair, up through the first bead in the next pair. Row 12, you're going to pick up a dagger bead and a seed bead, stitch it on top of that pair, down through the second bead in the pair. Have the dagger face away from you. Remember when we did our ring, we situated the dagger so his little hole was vertical. Pull tight. This whole row you're going to need to work tightly. Stitch into the next pair, go into the first bead, pick up 2 seed beads, down through the second bead in that pair, and up through the first bead in the next pair. I've picked up a dagger and a seed, down, up. When I pull my work through, I'm going to tilt this up so you can see, I grasp my thread between my fingers like that. So as I'm pulling, this helps to keep from things knotting, and it also helps to keep your thread from getting tangled in the dagger beads that are going to be sticking out. Pick up 2 seed beads, down, up. Do that all the way around. Dagger seed, stitch, 2 seed beads, stitch. At the end of the row, go through 2 beads. For row 13, you're going to pick up 2 seed beads, and stitch them on top of that dagger seed stitch from the previous row. Down, up, and now you're going to pick up a dagger seed, and it's going to get stitched on top of the 2 seed bead pair from the previous row. Down, up, 2 seed beads, down, up, dagger, seed, down, up. So you can see how we're just putting those daggers now on top of the seed beads, so they're alternating, and it's going to look like a checkerboard pattern. So for the next 6 rows, you're going to repeat these 2 rows 3 more times. And again, at the end of every row, you need to go through 2 beads to end your row. So just keep working, and remember to work tight and keep your thread from not tangling around those daggers that are sticking out. So at the end of row 19, your piece should now look like this. For row 20, you're going to stitch a dagger and a seed bead on top of each pair of seed beads from the previous row. Then you're just going to stitch through the dagger seed of the previous row without adding any beads. This is going to be our first row of decreasing. So I go down, up. I already picked up my dagger and my seed. And then don't pick up anything. Stitch down, up. Do this all the way around. And of course, at the end of the row, go through two beads. Right now you're looking down at the top of the basket, and all you're seeing are dagger seed stitches, but some are sticking up more than others. I've picked up 2 seed beads, stitch down. There's our 2 seed beads on top. Pick up 1 seed bead, stitch all the way over to the next dagger seed stitch that's sticking up. And what you want to do at this point again is pull tight as you can. I'm actually going to hold that thread. Pick up 2 seed beads, herringbone stitch on top of the pair, down through the next bead. Pull tight. You're decreasing now, so it's really important to pull tight. Pick up 1 seed bead. Going to go all the way over to here to the next dagger seed stitch that's sticking up. Pull tight. You're pulling all those stitches together. Hold your thread. Pick up 2 seed beads. Down. Pick up 1 bead. Up. Continue doing this and pulling tight. I cannot emphasize that enough. Work all the way around the row, and at the end of the row, again, you're going to go through 2 beads at the end of the row. Row 22, I've picked up a dagger and a seed bead, and I'm going to stitch into the other half of the seed bead pair, and you've noticed I've changed to a curved beading needle at this point. You might find that useful. Now you're going to pick up 1 seed bead and stitch into the other half of this pair of beads. Again, pull tight. Now we're stitching into that single seed bead from the previous row. This is the most useful part for this curved needle. And go up to the next pair. And you're going to pick up a dagger and a seed. And normally the last couple rows I'm working upside down like this, not on the table, but of course you can't see what's going on at this point. So I work upside down and let gravity be my friend so the beads don't get entangled and the threads don't get entangled as I'm working. So for row 23, I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads. I'm going to stitch them on top of the dagger seed pair. Like that. And again, it's real important to pull tight and then just stitch through that single bead without adding anything. Pull tight, stitch into the dagger of the next dagger seed pair. And pick up 2 seed beads. Do that all the way around, and at the end of the row, go through 2 beads. Row 24, I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads, and I'm going to stitch them on top of the seed pair that's already there. And it's really important to work very tight. If you're using size 8s like I am right now for the medium-sized basket, you're also going to need to stitch 1 seed bead between the pairs. If you're doing 11s, don't do that. There's my 1 seed bead up into the next pair. Two beads. My little ears feel slightly warm from all your cursing, but I promise it will be worth it in the end. Pull tight on every stitch. Row 25, you won't be picking up any beads. You're just going to stitch through the pairs of beads from the previous row and pull tightly to pull them in a nice tight circle. Remember, herringbone is splayed apart at the top, so this is normal. Go through some beads, tie a knot, seal it, through some more beads, tie another knot, seal it, and bury your tail. And your little sea urchin herringbone basket is finished. I hope you enjoy making the projects in this video and that you will continue to explore the incredible versatility of the herringbone stitch. Margaret Scoville made this necklace using the circular herringbone for the flowers, and the rest is done in peyote stitch. Delta Wald made this sculptural piece using circular and flat herringbone stitch and peyote stitch. It's called My Cup Runneth Over. Virginia Blakelock made this flat herringbone sash that's fringed on the edge. She just made the pattern up as she went along. These 2 bracelets are made by Ilse Lofgren. The blue one is a tubular piece, and the beige one is worked flat with a larger bead between the stitches. Fran Stone has used arithmetic increases on her circular herringbone to create these wonderful floral patterns. The necklace is tubular herringbone. The bracelet is flat herringbone with larger beads inserted, and the herringbone is woven around them. Cheryl Lawson has created wonderful geometric patterns in her flat herringbone bracelets. The amulet bag is made of tubular herringbone stitch. This is a piece in progress by Jennifer Gallagher. She has done tubular herringbone around clear hospital tubing. This eventually will become a vessel. This was my first piece of herringbone stitch. I made a pocketbook, and I was influenced by Fair Isle knitting patterns. Around the edge is a little picot stitch done in beads.